All right, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Whenever you hear this message, I pray that you're poised to receive, to accept, and to respond to words of wisdom. Ashe. So today, I want to share a lesson with you about competition and conflict. Okay? And really, let's say it's a threefold lesson. There's competition, conflict, and competency. All right? Um, you may know someone or have known someone who, for one reason or another, the only way they know to communicate is through conflict. In your heart, you know that this person is kind, they're loving, you know that they really do care about you. But for just somehow the communication between this person is always riddled with conflict, right? They're always competing with you. They're always playing one-upsmanship with you. But no matter how you shake it, the communication is going to be, riddled with conflict. Such was the case between two Babalawo. These two Babalawo were assigned to the king. As such, anytime the king had a problem, it was up to them to cast Ifa and determine the best solution. If it was a monetary problem, if it was a health problem, if it was a relationship problem, if it was a problem with neighboring kingdoms, no matter what problem the king has, he goes to these two Babalawos and they solve the problem. Now, in order for you to understand the nature of this and what it means, you got to appreciate the way Ifa works. Ifa is optimized by the fact that an Odu is cast, I know 4 verses, you know 4 verses, he knows 4 verses, he knows 4 verses, he knows 4 verses. And so the more Babalawo you have who know different verses, the more perspectives you get on a single Odu. And all the verses will be recited, and then it's up to the client to say, of everything that was said, what he said about money and what he said about children and what he said about health, those are the things that speak to my condition. And that's going to determine how we make the sacrifice, how we prescribe the medicine, how we assign observances, or what people commonly call taboos. All right? So you can imagine then, that being the case, these two Babalawo are serving the king year after year, and every time the king has a problem, they solve the problem. And so they're keeping score between the two of them. When the king had this problem with the queen, I had the solution. Yeah, but when the king had this problem with the neighboring kingdom, I had the solution. When the king had this problem in the marketplace, I had the solution, right? So they're keeping score between one another on who is providing the most solutions to the problem. Meanwhile, somewhere in the dynamic, one of the Babalawo is partially focused on his competency and ability to solve problems, but then he is equally attached to, that's how he communicates with that's his relationship with the other Babalawo, is competing. And so at the point that this competitive, conflictual Babalawo has lost sight of solving problems, and he's only focused on, combating and contesting and refuting his colleague, now the nature of their relationship is off. They're not focused on what they need to be focused on, because this guy is the only way he knows how to build a relationship is through competition. So it starts to degenerate to the point that not only are they competing with one another, but now one is starting to undermine the other. It's not enough that he has more verses. It's not enough that he knows more taboos. It's not enough that he knows more akoshe. Now his focus is on poisoning the king's mind and other people's minds and other people's opinions of his colleague. because his motivation has become distorted. And so he's now starting a whispering campaign. He's now undermining his colleague. He's now trying to create an environment wherein people don't have as much trust and confidence in him. And so when the other Babalawo detects this, so now his focus is on combating his colleague also. So they're going back and forth, and you can imagine what happens. The problems are not being solved. The king is losing ground. The kingdom is starting to suffer. Finally, one of them goes to consult Ifa himself independently. And they tell him, you are embroiled in a low-level battle. You've lost sight of your mission. You've lost sight of the goal of competency and problem solving, and you're focused on competition. You need to abandon this competition, and you need to go back to solving problems. And when you go back to solving problems and focusing on solving problems, then the energy is going to be released, the king is going to be relieved, and things are going to start to flourish again. He makes the sacrifice, and he does exactly as he's advised. And as Ifa predicted, the problems being solved allowed things to flourish once again, and as it turned out, he was, elevated to a higher position than his colleague. Ifa is advising us of those instances wherein we're involved with people who are determined to stay in a grudge match, not because they have a better solution, not because they are better equipped, but because that is their only way of relating with other people. Someone is arguing with you and going back and forth with you because they're afraid of letting you go. They're afraid of letting you rise. They feel as though if without the conflict, without the back and forth, without the grudge match, there's nothing that keeps you bound to one another. And that very well may be the case, but it may not be the case. What you have to do first and foremost is you've got to focus on competency. You've got to see your identity as a problem solver. You got to understand that your ability to optimize your natural gifts and talents and deliver the highest performance possible is 100% it's evidenced by your ability to solve problems. It's not about one-upsmanship. If in the process of solving problems, you end up having a higher performance than other people, then so be it. But that's not your goal. If it turns out that you get more notoriety than the next person, then so be it. But that's not your goal. If it turns out that you get compensated more than your colleagues, then so be it. But that's not the goal. That's a byproduct of your commitment to being the embodiment of problem solving. In order to do that, you must do two things. Number one, you got to be clear about who you are. You got to be clear about what your essence is. You got to be clear about what your mission is. You got to know your natural gifts and talents, ladies and gentlemen. You got to know who you serve. Okay? You know your natural gifts and talents. Now the next task is to get super clear about who do you serve? Who are your natural gifts and talents for? What do you do for these people? How is your presence essential to people's ability to go from point A to point B? What are you doing for them? Are you opening doors? Are you shutting down obstacles? Are you connecting the dots? What is it that you do for this group of people? Okay? And then what is the greatest imaginable outcome? If you are really optimized, if you're doing the best that you can do for these folks, what could happen? What's the greatest thing that could result from you doing your best job for the people who need you the most? Let that be your focus. Let that be your mission. Don't let anything or anybody distract you. Okay? This is a lesson that I am sending out to the leaders. If you're someone who is really, really clear about the importance of you improving the world through positive influence, then I want you to find out how Oloye or Bafemi Origuwa and the Orisha Lifestyle Academy can help you take your practice and your life to the highest level possible. Visit me today at obafemio.com or orishalifestyle.com, and let's start working ceaselessly to help you to live the medicine that will heal your life and heal the lives of those who you are destined to serve. I look forward to working with you. Bye for now. Odabo.